My billionaire COX passed out at his Christmas gala. And the one who saved him was our secret son he abandoned, Part 2. He's my father, isn't he? Lucas said quietly. The directness of the question stunned me into momentary silence. Vivian made a small sound of surprise beside me. How did you? I finally managed. The way he looked at me when he regained consciousness. Like he was seeing something impossible. Lucas's voice was steady, but I could see the emotion building behind his carefully controlled expression. And then when he saw you standing behind me, it was like everything suddenly made sense to him. Plus, he added with a hint of his usual wry humor, I do have a mirror. We have the same jawline. I felt a surge of anger rise within me. This was exactly what I'd feared for 16 years. Dominic Westbrook barging back into our lives, disrupting everything we'd built. Yes, I confirmed, my voice tight. Dominic Westbrook is your biological father. But that's all he is, Lucas. A biological connection. Nothing more. Lucas nodded slowly, absorbing this confirmation. So the graduate student story was a kinder version of the truth. I leaned forward, needing him to understand. When I told Dominic I was pregnant with you, do you know what he did? He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't discuss options. He pulled out his checkbook and wrote me a check to take care of it. Like you were a problem to be solved with money. Lucas flinched slightly, and I immediately regretted my bluntness. But I couldn't stop now. He needed to know exactly who Dominic Westbrook was. When I told him I was keeping you, he said, and I quote, then you'll do it without me. I'm 3 months away from the Nakamura merger. I don't have time for distractions. Distractions, Lucas. That's what you were to him. That's what I was. Mom. Lucas's voice was soft, his eyes wide with the pain I'd tried to protect him from all these years. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but you need to understand who he really is. I squeezed his hand tightly. This man has had 16 years to find us, to be part of your life. We haven't been hiding, but he chose his company, his wealth, his precious legacy over you every single day for 16 years. Vivian placed a gentle hand on my arm. Maya, maybe? No, Viv. I shook her off. Lucas deserves the whole truth. Dominic Westbrook is a manipulator. He uses people until they're no longer useful, then discards them. That's what he did to me, and that's what he would have done to you if I'd let him into your life. Did he ever try to contact you? After I was born? Lucas asked, his voice remarkably steady despite the emotional bombshell I just dropped. Not once. I shook my head firmly. Tonight was the first time I've spoken to him in 16 years. And suddenly he's interested? Now that you're 16, brilliant, accomplished? Now that you've literally saved his life? How convenient for him. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Vivian reached over and squeezed his shoulder in silent support, giving me a look that clearly said I was being too harsh. He knew who I was tonight, Lucas finally said. Before you said anything, he recognized me somehow. I nodded, my jaw tight. He told me at the hospital that he's known about you for 3 years. He saw your photo in the newspaper after that robotics championship and recognized himself in your features. 3 years. Lucas's eyebrows shot up. And he never tried to contact me? Exactly. I seized on this point. He's known about you for 3 years and did nothing. Nothing, Lucas. What kind of father does that? He only cares now because you saved him, because it makes a good story, because maybe he's finally realized he needs an heir for his precious company. Mom, I understand you're angry. I'm not angry, I interrupted, though we both knew that was a lie. I'm protective. This man hurt me in ways I've never fully explained to you, and I won't let him hurt you too. He doesn't deserve to know you, Lucas. He doesn't deserve to benefit from the amazing person you've become. A person you became without a single contribution from him. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. That unconscious gesture so like Dominic's it made my anger flare even hotter. So what happens now? Nothing happens, I said firmly. We go back to our lives. Dominic Westbrook goes back to his empire. Nothing changes. Don't I get a say in this? Lucas's voice was quiet but had an edge I rarely heard. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Of course you do. But I need you to understand what you'd be getting into. This man isn't suddenly going to become Father of the Year. He's calculating Lucas. Everything is a transaction to him. If he wants to know you now, it's because he believes you have value to add to his life, not because he cares about you. You don't know that for sure, Lucas countered. People can change in 16 years. Not people like Dominic Westbrook. I shook my head vehemently. Men like him don't change. They just find new ways to get what they want. I think I'd like to decide that for myself. Lucas's tone was respectful but firm. I appreciate you wanting to protect me, Mom. I do. But I'm not a child anymore. Lucas, please. I reached for his hand again. I've spent 16 years making sure you never felt the rejection I felt that night. Don't invite that pain into your life now. What if it's not about pain? Lucas asked. What if it's about understanding where I come from? About getting answers to questions I've had my whole life. I've answered your questions, I insisted. I've told you everything important. You've told me your side, Lucas said gently. Maybe I need to hear his too. The thought of Lucas sitting across from Dominic, vulnerable to his manipulation, his charm, made my stomach twist with anxiety. He'll hurt you, Lucas. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not right away, but eventually. That's what he does. Maybe. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. But that's my risk to take, isn't it? I looked at my son. My brilliant, compassionate son who had his father's analytical mind but none of his coldness, and saw a determination I recognized all too well. The same determination that had gotten me through pregnancy and single motherhood, through graduate school and building a career while raising a child alone. I need to think about this, Lucas said, standing up. It's a lot to process. Take all the time you need, I said, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. There's no rush to decide anything. I think I'll go to my room for a bit. He hesitated at the doorway. I understand why you're upset, Mom. I do. But this isn't just your story anymore. It's mine too. After he left, Vivian and I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening settling around us. You went too hard, she finally said, her voice gentle but firm. You're pushing him toward Dominic, not away. How can you say that? I demanded. After everything Dominic did, or didn't do. Because I know teenagers, Maya. Tell them not to do something, and it immediately becomes the only thing they want to do. Vivian sighed. Plus, Lucas is right. He deserves to form his own opinion. So I should just stand back and watch while Dominic Westbrook waltzes into our lives and hurts my son? I shook my head. I can't do that, Viv. I won't. No one's asking you to stand back. But you can't stand in the way either. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Lucas is smart, Maya. Smarter than both of us. Trust that you've raised him well enough to see through any manipulation Dominic might try. I do trust Lucas, I said softly. It's Dominic I don't trust. Then be there. Be present. But let Lucas make his own choice. Vivian stood, gathering our empty mugs. And maybe consider that people can change. 16 years is a long time. Not Dominic, I insisted. Men like him don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluding me despite my exhaustion, I found myself replaying Dominic's words at the hospital. When you walk away from humanity for long enough, you stop recognizing it in yourself. Empty words from a man who had mastered the art of saying what people wanted to hear. I wouldn't be fooled again, and I wouldn't let Lucas be fooled either. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Dominic. Is he okay? Are you? I know tonight must have been difficult for both of you. The audacity of his concern after 16 years of absence made my blood boil. I typed back furiously. Stay away from my son, Dominic. You gave up any right to him when you called him a distraction. He doesn't need you now, and neither do I. The response came a few minutes later. I understand your anger, Maya. It's justified. But if Lucas wants to know me, will you really stand in the way of that? I stared at the message, hating that he'd zeroed in on my greatest fear, that in trying to protect Lucas, I might end up pushing him away. I didn't respond, but sleep was impossible now, my mind racing with all the ways Dominic Westbrook could disrupt the life we'd built, all the ways he could hurt Lucas if given the chance. 3 tense days passed in our apartment. Lucas was polite but distant, spending more time than usual in his room or at the library. I wanted to press him, to make him understand why I was so adamant about keeping Dominic out of our lives, but Vivian's warning kept me silent. The more I pushed, the more I risked pushing him straight into Dominic's waiting arms. On the 4th morning, Lucas appeared in the kitchen as I was making coffee, already dressed for school but with a determined set to his shoulders that told me he'd made a decision. "I want to meet him," he said without preamble. "Properly, I mean, not while he's having a medical emergency." My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. "Lucas, I really don't think." "Mom." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've thought about this a lot. I understand why you're worried. I understand why you hate him. But I need to do this for me." "He'll hurt you," I said, unable to keep the fear from my voice. "Maybe not intentionally, but he will." "Maybe." Lucas nodded. "But that's my risk to take. And honestly, Mom, I'm not going in with any expectations. I don't need a father, you've been more than enough. I just need answers." I wanted to argue, to forbid it, to protect him from the pain I knew was coming. But looking at my son, so grown up, so thoughtful, so determined, I realized I couldn't shield him forever, and trying to might do more damage than Dominic ever could. "I have conditions," I said finally. "I'll be there at least for the first meeting, and it happens somewhere public, not his office or home." "That's fair." Lucas looked relieved that I wasn't fighting him on this. "And I want him to understand that this doesn't automatically make him my father. Biology isn't the same as being a parent." Pride mingled with my fear as I nodded. "I'll make sure he understands that." "This weekend, maybe?" Lucas suggested. "I don't want to drag it out now that I've decided. I'll contact him today." The words felt like ash in my mouth. Lucas grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, tossing it lightly in his hand. "One more thing, Mom. I'm doing this for me, not for him. I want to know where I come from, who contributed to half my DNA. But I already know who my parent is." He leaned over and kissed my cheek. "That's never going to change." As he headed out the door for school, I stood in the kitchen, coffee forgotten, torn between pride in the young man I'd raised and terror at what might happen when he came face to face with Dominic Westbrook. I'd spent 16 years protecting Lucas from his father's rejection. Now I had to trust that I'd given him the strength to protect himself. Later that morning, with shaking hands, I texted Dominic, "Lucas wants to meet you. This Saturday, 2 p.m., at the Riverside Cafe. I'll be there too. This is his choice, not mine. Hurt him, and you'll regret it." His response was immediate. "I'll be there. Thank you, Maya. I promise I only want to know him, not disrupt what you've built." Empty promises from a man who had never kept his word to me before. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about Lucas and his right to know the truth, all of it, not just my version. Saturday arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Lucas and I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, securing a quiet table by the window. He was outwardly calm, but I noticed the way he kept adjusting his watch strap, a nervous habit from childhood. "We can leave any time you want," I reminded him. "Just say the word." "I know." He squeezed my hand briefly. "But I need to do this." Dominic arrived precisely at 2, punctual as always. He dressed casually by his standards, a charcoal sweater and dark jeans rather than his usual bespoke suits, but still carried himself with the unmistakable confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. His eyes found us immediately, and I saw him take a deep breath before approaching our table. "Maya." "Lucas." He nodded to each of us, his voice carefully controlled. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Have a seat," I said coldly, gesturing to the empty chair across from Lucas. Dominic sat, his gaze fixed on Lucas with an intensity that made my protective instincts flare. The resemblance between them was striking. The same strong jawline, the same analytical eyes, even similar mannerisms as they both leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. "How are you feeling?" Lucas asked, breaking the silence first. "After your syncope episode." "Fully recovered, thank you." Dominic's lips quirked in a small smile. "The doctors tell me it was likely caused by dehydration and exhaustion. Apparently even billionaires need adequate sleep and water." "Everyone does," Lucas agreed. "The human body doesn't make exceptions for net worth." A waitress approached, momentarily breaking the tension as we ordered. Coffee for Dominic and me, hot chocolate for Lucas. When she left, silence fell again, heavy with 16 years of absence. "I don't know where to begin," Dominic finally admitted, a rare acknowledgement of uncertainty from a man who always seemed to have a plan. "There's so much I want to say, to ask. Why don't we start with why you're here?" Lucas suggested, his tone direct but not unkind. "Why now, after 16 years? Dominic nodded, accepting the challenge in the question. "The simple answer is that I've changed. The man I was when your mother told me she was pregnant, that man was obsessed with success to the exclusion of everything else. He believed relationships, family, anything that couldn't be measured in market share or profit margins was a distraction from what mattered." "Convenient timing for this epiphany," I muttered, unable to help myself. Dominic glanced at me, then back to Lucas. "Your mother has every right to be skeptical. I hurt her deeply, and I abandoned you before you were even born. Those aren't actions that can be easily forgiven or forgotten." "And now?" Lucas prompted, ignoring my interruption. "What's changed?" "Now I understand how profoundly wrong I was." Dominic's gaze shifted briefly to me, then back to Lucas. "I built the company I wanted, achieved every goal I set, and discovered that success feels hollow when you have no one to share it with, no purpose beyond accumulation. So you remembered you had a son and thought, what? That I could fill that void for you." Lucas's question was pointed, but his tone remained calm, curious rather than accusatory. "No." Dominic shook his head firmly. "I don't expect you to fill any void in my life, Lucas. I don't expect anything from you at all. I simply want the chance to know you, the person you are, not some idealized version of a son I imagined. And perhaps, if you're willing, to be someone of value in your life, in whatever capacity you might allow." Our drinks arrived, providing a moment for Lucas to consider this response. I watched him wrap his hands around the mug of hot chocolate, a gesture he'd had since childhood when thinking deeply. "When did you first learn about me?" Dominic's gaze shifted to his hands, those capable hands that had built an empire but had never once held his son. 3 years ago, as I mentioned to your mother at the hospital. There was a photograph in the Tribune's education section. A group of middle school students who'd won a robotics championship. The city-wide STEM challenge, Lucas nodded. "We built an automated water filtration system." "Yes." Something like pride flickered across Dominic's face. I almost turned the page, but something about one of the faces caught my attention. "You have your mother's smile, but when I looked closer, you saw yourself," Lucas finished for him. "I did." Dominic met his gaze directly. It was like looking at a photograph of myself at your age, but with a warmth, a humanity I never possessed. I knew immediately. "And you did nothing?" I interjected, unable to contain myself. "For 3 years, you knew you had a son and did absolutely nothing." Dominic didn't flinch from my accusation. "Yes, that's correct." "Why?" Lucas asked, his voice remarkably steady. "If you recognized me, if you knew I was your son, why not reach out?" "Because I had no right to," Dominic said simply. "I gave up that right 16 years ago when I chose my company over you and your mother. What claim could I possibly make after walking away? What right did I have to disrupt the life you'd built without me?" "So what changed?" Lucas pressed. "Why now?" Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Nothing changed suddenly. It's been a gradual process of, I suppose you could call it awakening. Seeing you in that photograph started something in me. I began following your accomplishments from a distance, the science competitions, your EMT certification, your volunteer work at the hospital. You've been stalking my son, I said flatly. I've been learning about him, Dominic corrected, his eyes never leaving Lucas. Learning about the remarkable young man you've become without any contribution from me. And with each new discovery, the magnitude of what I'd thrown away became clearer. That doesn't answer why now, Lucas pointed out, his analytical mind cutting through the sentiment to the core question. No, it doesn't. Dominic nodded, acknowledging the evasion. The truth is, I've been working up the courage to approach you for months. I even drove by your school once, thinking I might, introduce myself somehow. But I always stopped short, convinced I would only cause harm by inserting myself into your life. Until I saved your life at the gala, Lucas said. Until fate forced our paths to cross, Dominic amended. I didn't plan that meeting, Lucas. But when I opened my eyes and saw you there, when I realized who you were and what was happening, it felt like the universe was giving me one chance to at least acknowledge the truth. Couldn't help but scoff. The universe. That's convenient. Mom, Lucas said quietly, a gentle request for restraint. Sorry, I muttered, though I wasn't. Dominic's smooth explanations, his carefully crafted narrative of regret and redemption. It was all too perfect, too calculated. You have every reason to be skeptical, Maya, Dominic said, surprising me by addressing my suspicion directly. I've given you no reason to trust my intentions or believe I've changed. No, you haven't, I agreed coldly. He turned back to Lucas. I don't expect forgiveness from either of you. What I did was unforgivable. I'm not asking to be your father. That role belongs to the person who raised you, who was there for every moment that mattered. I'm simply asking for the chance to know you, and for you to know me, if that's something you want. Lucas studied him for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. I have questions. I'll answer anything you ask, Dominic promised. Complete honesty. When my mom told you she was pregnant, what exactly went through your mind? Not what you said or did, I know that part. But what were you thinking? The directness of the question seemed to catch Dominic off guard. He glanced at me briefly, then back to Lucas. The truth is, I panicked, he admitted. I saw everything I was building, all my plans, potentially derailed by an unexpected responsibility. I didn't think about the baby, about you as a person. I thought about you as a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed from my path to success. Lucas nodded, absorbing this brutal honesty. And now? What do you think about when you look at me now? I think about all I've missed, Dominic said quietly. I think about how empty success feels when you've sacrificed your humanity to achieve it. I think about how much richer my life might have been if I'd made a different choice 16 years ago. Pretty words, I muttered, earning another gentle look from Lucas. What would you have done differently? Lucas asked, ignoring my comment. If you could go back to that moment when my mom told you she was pregnant, what would you change? Dominic considered this carefully. I'd like to say I would have embraced the news, embraced fatherhood. But that would be a lie. The man I was then wasn't capable of that kind of selflessness. He paused, then continued with painful honesty. What I should have done was recognize my limitations. I should have said, I'm not ready to be a father, but I will provide financial support. I will check in. I will leave the door open to being part of this child's life when I'm more capable of it. Instead of writing a check and walking away, Lucas said, instead of the cruelty and dismissal I showed your mother, yes. Dominic's gaze shifted to me, genuine regret in his eyes. I can never undo that harm. I know that. I looked away, unwilling to be moved by his apparent sincerity. This was Dominic Westbrook, master manipulator, saying exactly what he knew would appeal to Lucas's sense of fairness and compassion. What do you want from me now? Lucas asked, bringing the conversation back to the present. Specifically, what are you hoping will come from this? The chance to know you, Dominic replied simply. To understand who you are, what matters to you, what you hope for your future. And perhaps, over time, to be someone you might turn to if you need advice, resources, or simply another perspective. Not a father, Lucas clarified. No, you already have a parent who has done that job magnificently. Dominic's gaze shifted briefly to me. I wouldn't presume to claim a role I haven't earned. The conversation continued for another hour, Lucas asking pointed, thoughtful questions about Dominic's life, his company, his values. I remained largely silent, watching my son navigate this complex situation with a maturity that both impressed and worried me. He was giving Dominic exactly what he wanted, a chance, and I could only hope he wouldn't be hurt in the process. As we prepared to leave, Dominic handed Lucas a business card. My personal number is on the back. If you ever want to talk again, about anything at all, I'm available. No pressure, no expectations. Lucas accepted the card with a nod. I'll think about it. Outside the cafe, as we walked toward the subway, I finally asked the question that had been burning inside me throughout the meeting. What did you think? Do you believe him? Lucas was quiet for several steps, considering. I believe he regrets his choices, he finally said. Whether that regret is enough to make him trustworthy, I'm not sure yet. He's very good at saying what people want to hear, I warned. It's how he built his company, by telling investors and partners exactly what would get them to sign on the dotted line. I know. Lucas glanced at me with a small smile. I'm not naive, Mom. I don't expect him to suddenly become Father of the Year. But I think there might be value in getting to know him on my terms. And if he disappoints you? The question that terrified me most. Then I'll have learned something important. Lucas shrugged. And I'll still have you. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, marveling at how tall he'd grown, how wise beyond his years. Always, no matter what. If you've ever had to watch someone you love take a risk that scared you to your core, hit that like button. Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is trusting them to make their own choices, even when those choices might lead to pain. The weeks that followed were a strange new reality for us. Lucas and Dominic began a cautious relationship, meeting occasionally for lunch or to attend lectures at the Natural History Museum, Lucas's choice of neutral territory. I wasn't invited to these meetings, and though it worried me, I respected Lucas's need to form his own impressions without my influence. He's actually pretty interesting to talk to, Lucas told me after their third meeting. He knows a lot about medical technology. We had a fascinating discussion about the neural interface his company is developing. Just be careful, I cautioned, trying not to let my anxiety show. Remember that Dominic is a businessman first. Everything is a transaction to him. Mom. Lucas's tone was gentle but firm. I know you're worried, but I'm not looking for a father in him. I'm just getting to know the person who contributed to half my DNA. I know, sweetheart. I trust your judgment. The words were difficult to say, but I meant them. I just don't want to see you hurt. If he hurts me, that's on him, not on me. Lucas's wisdom sometimes took my breath away, and it won't change anything important in my life. As Christmas approached, our first holiday season with this new complication in our lives, I noticed Lucas becoming more thoughtful, spending more time alone in his room. I worried that Dominic was somehow influencing him, pulling him away from me, but I tried to give him space to process everything. Then, 3 days before Christmas, Lucas came home from school with an unexpected request. I want to invite Dominic to Christmas dinner, he said without preamble as I was preparing dinner. Not the whole day, just for dinner. The knife I was using to chop vegetables stilled in my hand. Lucas, hear me out, Mom. He leaned against the counter, his expression earnest. I've spent some time with him now. He's not perfect, far from it, but he's trying. And he's going to be alone on Christmas. That's his choice, I pointed out. He could have had a family for the past 16 years. I know, and I'm not saying we should forget that or pretend it didn't happen. Lucas took a deep breath. But I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately. Not for his sake, but for ours. For mine. What do you mean? Holding on to anger takes energy, Mom. Energy I could be using for other things. He met my gaze directly. I'm not saying you have to forgive him. Your relationship with him is your business. But I think I want to try, not to make him my father, but to see if there's something worth salvaging from this mess. I set the knife down carefully, buying time to process my thoughts. This is our Christmas, Lucas. Our tradition. Just the two of us and sometimes Aunt Vivian. I know. And if you really can't handle having him here, I'll respect that. His voice was gentle. But I think it might be good for all of us to try something new, to see if we can create something positive out of this situation. I looked at my son. My compassionate, thoughtful son who had every right to be angry at the man who had abandoned him before birth, yet was somehow finding the grace to consider forgiveness. How could I stand in the way of that, no matter how much the thought of sharing our Christmas with Dominic Westbrook made my stomach knot with anxiety? Just dinner, I finally conceded. And he brings nothing. No gifts, no grand gestures. This isn't about him buying his way into our lives. Relief and gratitude washed over Lucas's face. Thank you, Mom. I'll make sure he understands the conditions. As he left the kitchen to call Dominic, I leaned heavily against the counter, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Dominic Westbrook had hurt me more deeply than anyone in my life. The thought of him sitting at our table, in our home, felt like an invasion of the safe space I'd created for Lucas and myself. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about Lucas and his need to make peace with his origins, to find his own path forward. If I truly trusted the young man I'd raised, I had to trust this decision too, no matter how difficult. Christmas Day arrived with a light snowfall that turned the city into a postcard scene. Lucas and I spent the morning as we always did, opening gifts in our pajamas, making cinnamon rolls from scratch, watching classic holiday movies. If there was a tension underlying our usual traditions, an awareness of the evening to come, we both pretended not to notice. At 5 o'clock, as I was putting the finishing touches on our dinner, nothing fancy, just the traditional turkey and sides we made every year, the doorbell rang. Lucas, already dressed in a sweater and nice jeans, went to answer it while I remained in the kitchen, taking a moment to compose myself. "Merry Christmas," I heard Dominic say, his voice carrying down the hallway. "Thank you for inviting me." "Merry Christmas," Lucas replied. "Come in. Mom's just finishing up in the kitchen." I took a deep breath and stepped into the living room. Dominic stood just inside the door, looking almost uncomfortable, an expression I'd never associated with him before. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark pants, no tie, no watch worth more than my car. In his hands was a small, plainly wrapped package. "Maya," he nodded in greeting. "Thank you for allowing me to join you today." "Lucas wanted you here," I said simply. "Dinner will be ready in about 15 minutes. "I brought this," Dominic said, holding out the package to Lucas. "I know your mother said no gifts, but this isn't really a gift. It's something that belongs to you." Lucas glanced at me, silently asking permission. I nodded slightly, curiosity overcoming my resistance. He unwrapped the package carefully to reveal an old leather-bound book. Opening it, he found pages of handwritten notes, diagrams, and calculations. "This is my first lab notebook," Dominic explained. "From when I was about your age. My early ideas, experiments, some of which eventually led to founding Westbrook Industries. I thought you might find it interesting, given your interest in science and medicine." Lucas turned the pages with obvious fascination. "You were working on neural interfaces even back then. The very beginnings of the concept, yes." Dominic's expression softened. "I thought it might show you that some of your interests, your way of thinking, they might be inherited, not just learned." It was a thoughtful gesture, I had to admit. Not an expensive gift meant to impress or buy affection, but something personal, something that acknowledged the connection between them without trying to force a relationship that hadn't been earned. "Thank you," Lucas said sincerely. "This is really cool." "Dinner's ready," I announced, breaking the moment before it could become too comfortable. "Let's eat while it's hot." The meal itself was surprisingly normal. Lucas carried most of the conversation, talking about school, his hospital volunteer work, his plans for college applications next year. Dominic listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions without dominating the discussion. I remained mostly quiet, watching their interaction with a mixture of wariness and reluctant admiration for how carefully Dominic was treading. "Lucas tells me you're developing a new educational program at the Brightwood Foundation," Dominic said during a lull in the conversation, including me for the first time. "Something about connecting underprivileged students with medical mentors?" I nodded, surprised he'd bothered to learn about my work. "It's still in the planning stages, but yes. We're trying to create pathways for students from disadvantaged backgrounds to explore careers in healthcare." "It sounds innovative," he said. "The kind of program that could genuinely change lives." "That's the goal." I found myself explaining the details of the program despite my determination to keep emotional distance. "Many of these kids have never even met a doctor or nurse who looks like them, who comes from a similar background. We're trying to change that narrative. If you're looking for corporate partners, Westbrook's medical division might be interested." Dominic's tone was casual, not pushy. No strings attached, of course. Just something to consider. Before I could respond, Lucas jumped in. "Mom's program is already getting a lot of interest from several healthcare companies. She doesn't need Westbrook's help." I glanced at my son, touched by his protective instinct. "That's right. But thank you for the offer." Dominic nodded, accepting the rejection gracefully. "Of course. It's an impressive initiative either way." As the evening progressed, I found myself studying Dominic when he wasn't looking, searching for signs of the calculating, cold man I'd known 16 years ago. He was still confident, still articulate, still charismatic. But there was something different too. A certain humility that had never been there before, a carefulness in how he engaged with Lucas, never pushing, never assuming, always respecting boundaries. When Lucas excused himself to answer a call from a friend, leaving Dominic and me alone at the table, the awkward silence was palpable. "Thank you," Dominic finally said, his voice low, "for raising him to be the person he is. For doing it alone when you shouldn't have had to." I met his gaze directly. "I didn't do it for you." "I know." He nodded. "You did it for him. And that makes it all the more remarkable." "What are you really doing here, Dominic?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me all evening. "What do you want from Lucas?" He considered the question carefully. The honest answer? I don't know exactly. When I first saw his photo 3 years ago, it was curiosity, maybe a sense of obligation. But now, after meeting him, after seeing the kind of person he is, he paused, searching for words. I think I just want the privilege of knowing him, of perhaps contributing something positive to his life, if he'll allow it. And if he doesn't? If he decides after a few more meetings that he doesn't want you in his life, then I'll respect that decision, Dominic said without hesitation. I've already missed 16 years. I have no right to demand anything. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation, the calculation I was so certain was there. You've never accepted no in your entire life, Dominic. Your whole empire is built on getting what you want, no matter the obstacle. That was true, he acknowledged. For most of my life, I've approached every situation as a problem to be solved, an objective to be achieved. But this is different. Lucas isn't a merger to be negotiated or a competitor to be outmaneuvered. He's a person, a remarkable young man with his own agency, his own choices to make. And you expect me to believe you've had this profound character transformation, just like that? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Not just like that, no. Dominic's gaze dropped to his hands, those hands that had built an empire but had never held his son as a baby. It's been a gradual process. Years of achieving everything I thought I wanted and still feeling empty, hollow. The night I collapsed at the gala, the doctors called it vasovagal syncope, but I think it was something more, a physical manifestation of a life built on the wrong foundation. I deserve your suspicion, Maya. I've earned it. He met my gaze again. But I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking you to allow Lucas the space to make his own decisions about what role, if any, I might have in his life. Before I could respond, Lucas returned, and the moment passed. But as the evening continued, I found myself watching their interaction with new eyes. There was a genuine connection forming between them. Not father and son. Not yet. Maybe never. But two people with similar minds discovering shared interests, shared ways of seeing the world. When Dominic finally left, thanking us both for including him in our holiday, I felt a strange mixture of emotions I couldn't quite name. Relief that the evening was over, certainly. Lingering wariness about his intentions. But also, unexpectedly, a small seed of something that might have been hope. Hope that perhaps Lucas could have this connection without being hurt by it. That wasn't so bad, was it? Lucas asked as we cleaned up the kitchen together. It was different, I admitted. He seems to genuinely care about getting to know you. I think he does. Lucas loaded plates into the dishwasher with methodical precision. He's not what I expected. Based on your stories, people can present different faces to different people, I cautioned. The Dominic you're getting to know isn't necessarily the real Dominic. Maybe, Lucas shrugged. Or maybe he's changed. 16 years is a long time, Mom. People like Dominic Westbrook don't change fundamentally. I insisted, though with less conviction than before. They just get better at hiding who they really are. Maybe. Lucas closed the dishwasher and turned to face me. But I think everyone deserves the chance to be more than their worst mistake. Even him. I looked at my son. My compassionate, wise son who somehow had the capacity to consider forgiveness where I had only managed to maintain anger, and felt a surge of both pride and fear. Just promise me you'll be careful. That you'll protect your heart. I promise. He hugged me tightly. But you know, sometimes the greatest risk isn't in trusting someone new. It's in never giving anyone the chance to prove they've changed. If you've ever been challenged to see someone through new eyes, to consider that people might be capable of genuine change, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive isn't the one who hurt us, but the part of ourselves that wants to hold on to anger as protection. The new year brought unexpected developments in our complicated situation. Lucas continued meeting with Dominic occasionally, their relationship evolving into something that resembled a mentorship more than a traditional father-son bond. They discussed Lucas's interest in neurosurgery, visited medical technology exhibitions together, and even began collaborating on a small research project related to Lucas's upcoming science fair. I maintained my distance, neither encouraging nor discouraging their connection, though I watched carefully for any sign that Dominic was overstepping or manipulating Lucas in any way. To my surprise, and, if I'm honest, slight irritation, I found none. He seemed genuinely respectful of boundaries, never pushing for more than Lucas offered, never attempting to buy his affection with expensive gifts or grand gestures. He's helping me apply for this summer medical program at Johns Hopkins, Lucas told me one evening in February. He knows the director of the neuroscience department there. Of course he does, I muttered, unable to help myself. Dominic knows everyone who might be useful. Lucas gave me a look. Mom, it's not like that. He asked if I was interested. I said yes, and he made an introduction. That's all. I still have to apply and be accepted on my own merits. I know. I sighed, trying to be fair. I just worry about you getting too attached, too dependent on his connections. I'm not dependent on anyone, Lucas said firmly. But why shouldn't I accept help that's offered freely? Isn't that what you've always taught me? To use every resource available to achieve my goals. He had me there. I had always encouraged him to seek out opportunities, to never let pride stand in the way of advancement. I just hadn't expected those opportunities to come from Dominic Westbrook. You're right, I conceded. Just be aware that help often comes with expectations, even when they're not stated explicitly. Dominic's been pretty clear about his expectations or lack thereof, Lucas pointed out. He's never asked for anything in return. Not yet, I cautioned, though with less conviction than before. As winter melted into spring, I found myself gradually, reluctantly, adjusting to this new reality. Lucas was thriving, excelling in school, advancing his medical interests, and seeming more confident than ever. If his developing relationship with Dominic was contributing to that growth, could I really object? Then, in late March, came the invitation that would test all the fragile new boundaries we'd established. Dominic's receiving some Lifetime Achievement Award from the Technology Innovation Council. Lucas announced over dinner. There's a big ceremony next month. He's invited both of us to attend. Both of us? I repeated, surprised. Why would he invite me? Because you're my mom, Lucas said simply. And I think he's trying to acknowledge that, to show respect for your role in my life. I set down my fork, considering this. I don't know, Lucas. A public event? Playing Happy Families with Dominic Westbrook? That feels like a lot. We wouldn't be playing Happy Families, Lucas countered. We'd just be acknowledging reality. The complicated, messy reality that is our situation. And what exactly is that reality? I asked, genuinely curious about how he saw things now. Lucas thought for a moment. That Dominic is my biological father who made a terrible mistake 16 years ago. That you're my mom. My real parent in every way that matters. And that maybe, just maybe, there's room for both of you in my life in different roles. His words hit me with unexpected force. For 16 years, it had been just the two of us against the world. The thought of sharing any part of Lucas, of making space for Dominic in our carefully constructed life, still felt like a threat. But looking at my son, so mature, so thoughtful in how he was navigating this complex situation, I realized that perhaps the greatest threat wasn't to him, but to the narrative I'd built around our lives. I'll think about it, I promised, not ready to commit either way. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through photos on my phone. Images of Lucas growing up, from tiny baby to toddler to child to the young man he was becoming. In every stage, every milestone, it had been just us. Me teaching him to walk, to read, to ride a bike. Me sitting beside hospital beds during childhood illnesses, helping with science projects, cheering at Little League games. 16 years of being everything to him because I had to be. The thought of Dominic Westbrook stepping into that carefully constructed world, claiming any part of Lucas's achievements or future, still made my chest tight with anxiety. But wasn't that my issue to work through, not Lucas's burden to bear? My phone buzzed with a text message, startling me from my thoughts. It was from Dominic, a rare direct communication, as he usually respected my preference to coordinate through Lucas. Maya, I understand if you're not comfortable attending the TIC ceremony. I want to be clear that the invitation comes with no expectations or pressure. Lucas mentioned you might be concerned about public perception. I've instructed my PR team that any questions about personal matters are strictly off limits. This isn't about creating a narrative. It's simply about including you in a moment that matters to Lucas. Whatever you decide, I respect your choice. The message was typical Dominic, thoughtful, strategic, addressing my concerns before I'd even voiced them. But there was also something else there, something that felt like genuine respect for my position in Lucas's life. After a long moment, I typed back, "I'll be there. For Lucas." His response was simple, "Thank you. It means more than you know." The night of the ceremony arrived with all the pomp and circumstance one would expect from an event honoring one of the country's most successful tech innovators. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel had been transformed into a futuristic wonderland, with interactive displays showcasing Westbrook Industries' technological achievements throughout the years. Lucas and I arrived together, him looking handsome and grown up in the suit we'd bought for the occasion, me feeling slightly out of place despite my carefully chosen dress. This was Dominic's world. Wealthy, powerful, influential, and I couldn't help but feel like an interloper. "Ms. Reynolds, Lucas." Dominic greeted us at the entrance, looking impeccable in a tailored tuxedo. "Thank you both for coming. Congratulations on the award," I said politely. "It's quite an honor." "Thank you." He nodded, then turned to Lucas with genuine warmth. "They have some of the neural interface prototypes on display in the East Wing. I thought you might find them interesting." "Definitely," Lucas agreed enthusiastically. "Can we check them out before the ceremony starts?" "Of course." Dominic glanced at me. "Maya, would you like to join us? Or would you prefer to find our table?" The question was offered without pressure, giving me a graceful way to maintain distance if I wanted. But something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a desire to see Lucas and Dominic interact in this setting, made me say, I'll come along. I'd like to see what all the fuss is about. As we moved through the exhibition, I watched Lucas and Dominic together, the animated way they discussed the technology, the similar gestures they used when making a point, the shared excitement over possibilities that were beyond my technical understanding. There was no denying the connection between them, a natural affinity that went beyond their few months of knowing each other. This is the project I was telling you about, Dominic was saying, leading us to a display featuring a sleek headset, the one that could revolutionize treatment for certain types of brain injuries. The direct neural pathway stimulation? Lucas asked, examining the device with obvious fascination. How far along are the clinical trials? Phase 2, Dominic replied. The preliminary results are promising, especially for patients with traumatic brain injuries who haven't responded to traditional therapies. That's incredible, Lucas said, his eyes alight with interest. This could change everything for those patients. Watching them, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Pride in Lucas's knowledge and passion, a lingering wariness about Dominic's influence, but also, unexpectedly, a kind of peace. This connection between them, this shared intellectual excitement, wasn't something I could have given Lucas, no matter how much I loved him or how hard I tried. It was something uniquely theirs. The ceremony itself was predictably grandiose, with video tributes from tech luminaries and glowing speeches about Dominic's contributions to the industry. When it came time for him to accept the award, he approached the podium with his usual confidence. But there was something different in his demeanor, a humility that hadn't been there in the Dominic I'd known years ago. Thank you for this honor, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. When I founded Westbrook Industries 20 years ago, I had a singular vision, to create technology that would change the world. In many ways, we've achieved that vision. Our innovations have transformed industries, improved lives, generated wealth beyond what I could have imagined. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before continuing. But success, I've learned, is a more complex concept than I once believed. For most of my career, I measured it in market share, in profit margins, in technological breakthroughs. I pursued those metrics with single-minded focus, often at the expense of more human considerations. My attention sharpened. This didn't sound like the carefully crafted, PR-approved acceptance speech I'd expected. Recently, I've been fortunate enough to gain a new perspective, Dominic continued, to understand that true innovation isn't just about creating new technology, but about creating technology that serves humanity in meaningful ways, that connects us rather than isolates us, that heals rather than harms. His gaze found our table, resting briefly on Lucas. I've also learned that legacy isn't measured solely in patents or profit, but in the impact we have on others, in the wisdom we share, the mentorship we provide, the way we lift up the next generation of innovators. The speech continued, touching on Westbrook's future directions and thanking various colleagues and partners. But that moment, that acknowledgement of a shift in values, delivered while looking at the son he'd once rejected, felt significant in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Later, as the formal part of the evening gave way to mingling and networking, I found myself alone at our table, watching from a distance as Lucas and Dominic spoke with a group that included several prominent neurosurgeons. Lucas was clearly in his element, asking insightful questions and holding his own in the discussion despite being the youngest person there by decades. "He's remarkable," a voice said beside me. I turned to find an elegant older woman taking the seat next to mine. "Your son. Such poise. Such intelligence." "Thank you," I said, pride evident in my voice. "He is remarkable. I'm Eleanor Harrington," she introduced herself. "My husband sits on Westbrook's board." The name was vaguely familiar. I recalled seeing her at the Christmas Gala months ago. "Maya Reynolds. I know who you are," she said with a knowing smile. "The woman who raised that extraordinary young man entirely on her own. The woman who had every reason to keep him away from Dominic Westbrook, yet chose to allow this reconciliation, for lack of a better word. I stiffened slightly. You seem very well informed about our personal situation. I've known Dominic for 20 years, she said simply. I've never seen him as human as he's been these past few months. It's been quite the transformation to witness. People don't change fundamentally, I said, repeating what had become almost a mantra for me. Perhaps not fundamentally, no? Eleanor's gaze drifted to where Dominic stood, listening attentively as Lucas explained something with animated gestures. But they can evolve, can't they? They can recognize the emptiness of what they've built and seek something more meaningful. That's a very charitable interpretation. Later, as the formal part of the evening gave way to mingling and networking, I found myself alone at our table, watching from a distance as Lucas and Dominic spoke with a group that included several prominent neurosurgeons. Lucas was clearly in his element, asking insightful questions and holding his own in the discussion despite being the youngest person there by decades. "He's remarkable," a voice said beside me. I turned to find an elegant older woman taking the seat next to mine. "Your son. Such poise. Such intelligence." "Thank you," I said, pride evident in my voice. "He is remarkable. I'm Eleanor Harrington," she introduced herself. "My husband sits on Westbrook's board." The name was vaguely familiar. I recalled seeing her at the Christmas Gala months ago. "Maya Reynolds. I know who you are," she said with a knowing smile. "The woman who raised that extraordinary young man entirely on her own. The woman who had every reason to keep him away from Dominic Westbrook, yet chose to allow this reconciliation, for lack of a better word." I smiled slightly, surprising myself. "It wasn't an easy decision. The most important ones rarely are," Eleanor observed. "But watching them together, there's something quite healing in it, isn't there?" I followed her gaze to where Lucas and Dominic stood, their profiles so similar it was almost startling. "Yes," I admitted quietly, "there is. Dominic has changed," Eleanor said, her voice thoughtful. "In all the years I've known him, I've never seen him listen to anyone the way he listens to your son, as if every word matters." "Lucas has that effect on people," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Indeed, but it's more than that." She studied me with kind eyes. "You've given them both a precious gift, you know. Lucas, the chance to know where he comes from, and Dominic, the opportunity to be more than the sum of his ambitions." Before I could respond, Dominic approached our table, Lucas having been drawn into conversation with one of the neurosurgeons. "Eleanor," he greeted the older woman warmly. "Thank you for coming tonight." "I wouldn't have missed it," she replied, rising from her seat. "Your speech was quite revealing, Dominic. Almost vulnerable." She smiled at both of us. "I'll leave you two to talk. Maya, it was lovely meeting you properly." As Eleanor departed, Dominic hesitated, then gestured to the now empty chair. "May I?" I nodded, finding myself more at ease than I would have expected in his company. "Congratulations again on the award. It seems well-deserved." "Thank you." He sat, his posture less commanding than usual, almost tentative. "Maya, I wanted to thank you for coming tonight, for allowing Lucas to be part of this. I know it couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I agreed, "but it matters to Lucas. And seeing him tonight in his element discussing neuroscience with those doctors, it's clear he belongs in that world." "He does," Dominic agreed, his gaze finding Lucas across the room. "He has a brilliant mind, but more importantly, he has heart, compassion. That's all you, Maya. All your influence." The compliment caught me off guard. "He's always been that way. Even as a little boy, he cared so deeply about others." "I wish I had known him then," Dominic said quietly. "I wish I could have seen him grow up." The raw honesty in his voice stirred something unexpected in me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps understanding. "That was your choice, Dominic. The worst choice I ever made." He met my gaze directly. "Maya, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I want you to know how deeply I regret what I did 16 years ago. Not just walking away from Lucas, but how I treated you. The coldness, the dismissal. You deserved so much better. I'd imagined this moment so many times over the years. Dominic Westbrook apologizing, acknowledging the pain he'd caused. In my imagination, I'd remained cold, unmoved. But sitting here now, watching Lucas across the room, seeing the genuine regret in Dominic's eyes, I found that the anger I'd carried for so long had softened into something more complex. Why now? I asked the question that had been nagging at me for months. Why this sudden desire to make amends after all these years? Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. It wasn't sudden, he finally said. It's been a gradual awakening. Building Westbrook was all-consuming for years. I told myself the sacrifices were worth it, that success would justify everything I'd given up. And then one day, I looked around at everything I'd built and realized it meant nothing. I had no one to share it with, no purpose beyond the next acquisition, the next product launch. So Lucas is filling that void for you? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice entirely. No. Dominic shook his head firmly. Lucas isn't filling anything. He's showing me what I missed, yes. But more than that, he's challenging me to be better. To think beyond myself. To use what I've built for something more meaningful than just accumulating wealth and power. I studied him, looking for the manipulation, the calculation I'd always associated with him. But all I saw was a man confronting the consequences of choices made long ago, trying, imperfectly perhaps, to find a better path forward. Maya, he continued, his voice low and earnest, I'm not asking to be part of your life. I know that's too much to expect after everything. But I am asking for your forgiveness. Not for my sake, but for yours. So you don't have to carry the weight of that anger anymore. The words hit me with unexpected force. For 16 years, anger at Dominic had been a constant companion, fueling me through difficult times, justifying the walls I'd built around Lucas and myself. The thought of letting it go was almost frightening. What would fill that space? I don't know if I can forgive you completely, I said honestly, but I'm willing to try moving forward. For Lucas's sake. Relief washed over his features. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for a moment, watching Lucas across the room, animated and engaged as he discussed something with the neurosurgeon. He wants to apply to Harvard Medical School, I said, breaking the silence. It's been his dream since he was 12. He'll get in, Dominic said with certainty. With his grades, his extracurriculars, his EMT certification, he's exactly the kind of student they want. The tuition is astronomical, I admitted, voicing a concern I'd been carrying silently. I've been saving since he was born, but medical school. Maya. Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. Let me do this. Let me pay for his education. Not as a way to buy his affection or yours, but as a small step toward making amends for 16 years of absence. A year ago, I would have refused immediately, seeing it as an attempt to control, to buy his way into our lives. But now, looking at the man before me, humbled, genuinely remorseful, I found myself considering it. I'll think about it, I said finally. But it would be Lucas's decision, not mine. Of course. Dominic nodded, respecting the boundary. Whatever he decides, I just want him to know the option is there. If you've ever found yourself reconsidering someone you thought you knew completely, hit that like button. Sometimes the hardest people to forgive are the ones who hurt us most deeply, but sometimes that forgiveness frees us more than it does them. The months that followed brought a gradual, cautious thawing in my relationship with Dominic. We weren't friends, exactly, but we developed a kind of respectful coexistence centered around our shared interest in Lucas's well-being and future. When Lucas was accepted to the summer program at Johns Hopkins, on his own merits, though Dominic's introduction had opened the door for his application, we both attended the small celebration dinner Lucas wanted. To the future Dr. Reynolds, Dominic toasted, raising his glass with genuine pride. Or Dr. Reynolds Westbrook, Lucas said casually, watching both our reactions carefully. I've been thinking about it, about acknowledging both sides of my heritage. I felt a momentary tightness in my chest, but it passed quickly. This wasn't about Dominic replacing me or claiming ownership of Lucas. It was about Lucas embracing his complete identity, something I'd always taught him was important. Whatever you decide, I said, meaning it. It's your name, your choice. Thank you, Lucas said, squeezing my hand under the table. For everything, Mom. As summer turned to fall, Lucas's senior year brought college applications, more advanced hospital volunteering, and the increasingly comfortable rhythm of our new family dynamic. Dominic remained respectful of boundaries, never pushing for more than Lucas or I were willing to give, but steadily present in a way that gradually, surprisingly, became normal. One evening in late October, as Lucas was at a study group preparing for SATs, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Opening it, I found Dominic standing there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Dominic? Lucas isn't home. I know, he said. I wanted to speak with you, actually, if you have a moment. Curious, I invited him in, offering coffee which he accepted gratefully. We sat at the kitchen table where, nearly a year ago, Lucas had first learned the truth about his father. What's on your mind? I asked, noting his unusual hesitation. I've been offered a position, he said finally, leading a new medical technology initiative in partnership with the NIH. It would mean stepping back from day-to-day operations at Westbrook, focusing instead on developing technologies specifically for underserved communities. That sounds meaningful, I said, genuinely impressed. Different from your usual focus. Very different, he agreed. It's less about profit, more about impact. Using what I've built to make a genuine difference in healthcare accessibility. Lucas's influence, I observed. Partly, Dominic acknowledged. Seeing the world through his eyes has shifted my perspective considerably. But also yours, Maya. Mine. I couldn't hide my surprise. Your work at Brightwood, creating opportunities for underprivileged students. It made me think about what I could do with the resources and connections I have. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. The position would be based here in New York, but would involve some travel. I wanted to make sure. That is, I wanted to check if you would be comfortable with me remaining in Lucas's life, being present for his senior year, his graduation. The question touched me unexpectedly. A year ago, I would have wanted nothing more than for Dominic to disappear from our lives as suddenly as he had appeared. Now, the thought of him not being present for these milestones in Lucas's life seemed wrong somehow. Of course, I said softly. Lucas would want you there. And I would too. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, relief, gratitude, and something else I couldn't quite name. Thank you, Maya. That means more than you know. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. There's something else I've been wanting to ask you. Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? Just the two of us. The question caught me completely off guard. Dinner? Why? Because I'd like the chance to know you again, he said simply. Not as Lucas's mother, not as my ex, but as the remarkable woman you've become. The woman who built an extraordinary life and raised an exceptional son against all odds. I studied him, this man who had once broken my heart so completely, who was now looking at me with genuine admiration and something that might have been hope. The anger that had defined my feelings toward him for so long had gradually transformed over the past year, making space for something I hadn't expected: curiosity, respect, and perhaps the faintest beginnings of forgiveness. Dinner, I repeated, surprising myself with my answer. I think I'd like that. As Lucas's graduation approached the following spring, our unusual family unit had settled into a dynamic none of us could have predicted. Lucas had been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship, partly funded by an anonymous donation to the medical school that we all knew came from Dominic, though he never took credit for it. Dominic's medical technology initiative was making headlines for its innovative approach to healthcare accessibility. And I had been promoted to executive director at Brightwood, expanding our educational programs to 5 additional cities. And somewhere along the way, those dinners with Dominic had evolved from cautious conversations about Lucas to deeper discussions about our own lives, our work, our dreams for the future. I discovered that the man he had become, thoughtful, humble, genuinely committed to using his resources for good, was someone I might have chosen to know had we met under different circumstances. "Do you ever wonder?" he asked me one evening as we walked along the river after dinner. "What might have happened if I hadn't been such a fool 16 years ago? If I had made a different choice when you told me about the pregnancy?" I considered the question carefully. Sometimes. But then I look at the life Lucas and I built together, at the person he's become, and I can't regret the path that led us here. Even the painful parts. "You're remarkable, Maya," Dominic said softly. "I don't think I ever told you that back then. I was too focused on my own ambitions to see what was right in front of me. A brilliant, compassionate woman who would have been the perfect partner in every sense." The words stirred something in me I'd thought long buried. A flutter of possibility, of connection. "We were different people then," I said carefully. "Both of us." "We were," he agreed. "But perhaps that's the gift in all of this. The chance to know each other now, as the people we've become." As he walked me to my door that night, there was a moment, brief but electric, when the past and present seemed to converge. When the man who had once dismissed our child as a distraction looked at me with genuine admiration and regret for what might have been. "Good night, Maya," he said, not pushing, not presuming, but leaving the door open to whatever might come next. "Good night, Dominic," I replied, realizing with quiet surprise that the anger I'd carried for so long had finally, completely, transformed into something else. Not forgetting, not erasing the past, but allowing for the possibility of a different future. On Lucas's graduation day, as we watched him cross the stage to receive his diploma, this brilliant young man who had saved his father's life and, in doing so, set in motion a healing none of us could have imagined, Dominic reached for my hand. And for the first time in 16 years, I didn't pull away. If the story touched your heart, please subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. Remember that sometimes life's most beautiful chapters begin after its most painful ones, and that forgiveness, given not because it's deserved, but because it's needed, can free us to write endings we never imagined possible.